lost 17.5 pounds, and I'm experiencing a new phase of this fast that came unexpectedly soon. Things seem to be happening faster during this fast. And I also have the rest, part 2 of the story of how I got into Qigong and why I'm teaching this, why I'm sharing Qigong as a main life's mission now. So today, it's a little bit more of a subtle feeling, but it's at the same time the sensations are more subtle, but the feeling that I'm experiencing is a little more solid, if it makes sense. So for the past few days, if I drank some water, I could feel it, like I can actually feel the water coming through my kidneys. Now that's not a thing because I'm fasting, I just typically have, like I can feel that anyway. I've always been able to feel stuff like that. So I can feel the water going through my kidneys, and I can also feel, if you drink more water than your kidneys can handle, then it ends up going through your bowels a lot of the time. So I can also feel that water just kind of going through my system. Now, when you've been fasting for, let's just say 6 or 7 days, you still have food in there that you ate from prior to the fast. Every day, there's still bowel movements. There's still, believe it or not, there's still stuff in there that's coming out. So there's stuff that's been in there for 6, 7, 8 days. The stuff that's still been in there, it's like kind of, it's not fun to think about, but it's kind of rotting, and it's a little unpleasant. Like it could put, sometimes you might have some feelings of like just a general little mild disturbance. It wasn't even something that I thought worth mentioning in these videos. It wasn't even that intense, but I was aware of it. Now today, my thirst all of a sudden not thirsty at all. Like I was a lot thirstier over the past few days. And this entire fast, I've been drinking water if I felt like I needed it, and not really tracking that too closely. I've just expressed that in these videos. Today, I was on the phone for an hour, and my mouth got a little dry, so I had like a sip of water just to wet my mouth. Other than that, I don't even remember drinking water today. I've had a full glass sitting on the counter, and I have just had a few sips. Went out and mowed the lawn. Another little sip because of the dry mouth thing. But today, a new feeling has come over me where I was a lot more aware that I was fasting the past few days. Like I could feel like the buzzing in my body, and I could feel that it just felt like I hadn't eaten food in a long time. If that makes sense. Still didn't have any hunger, but even today, the idea of hunger is just such more of a foreign concept. I really feel no different than if I, in the past, maybe I followed a vegetarian diet and I ate normally, 3 meals a day kind of stuff. But when I was used to doing that, I mean, if I were to just arrive here and now without having a memory of the past couple of weeks, I feel like I might have eaten lunch about 2 hours ago. I mean, haven't eaten anything in 9 days, but food just doesn't factor into it. I actually feel like my energy went way up, and now I'm only sleeping about 4, 5 hours a night, so my need for sleep's gone down. And another more subtle transition, and I hadn't even thought about this, where over the past few days, if I went to change activities, like if I was sitting or laying down, and then I wanted to get up, let's say I wanted to go for a walk outside. If I got out of bed, got up, and like quickly rushed to the door, put my shoes on, and then walked outside, that like shifting gears rapidly, like quickly, just felt harsh to my system. It just, I wanted to take my time. I wanted to just kind of ease into it. And then by the time I got out there, if I just got up slowly and relax for a minute, walk over, maybe stand there for a little while, walk over, not a ridiculous amount of time, but just kind of take my time doing it. I really felt just naturally, I just kind of took my time, not making rapid transitions from one activity to another. Also mentally, if I'm mentally doing one thing or in one phase, kind of shifting gears into the next activity quickly, it just felt harsh, like a little bit of a shock to the system. Today, that completely vanished. Like now, I feel like I can go from 0 to 5,000 like instantly, and I've got the energy to do it, and still have a mellowness to me. You know, it's if you drink a lot of caffeine, you might be amped up, but there's a jitteriness. Well, that type of jitteriness is not a part of this. The feeling is I could probably fast forever. I never have to eat again. Like today, that's the feeling. The past few days, the difference was I was comfortable, I was okay, but it felt like maybe the next rest of the fast, the next 13 or 12 days, or whatever that is, it felt like that might feel like a longer time period. Like now, I've jumped into this next level where I just feel like normal again, right? Like the idea that I'm on a fast is almost like, am I really fasting? Just feels normal. Feel okay, and just food just isn't part of the equation. It's just a more refined adjustment to this fasting process. So pretty neat. The weight loss has also slowed down a little bit. In the beginning, it was on average 2 or 3 pounds a day. Now it was about a pound overnight last night. That's to be expected. The body has sort of, in the beginning it's getting rid of more waste and more water. Now I've been on kind of a regular program, so now it's really just the calories that I'm burning through fat, and that's pretty much what it is. So that's my fasting day 9 experience. Pretty cool transition to hit. In prior fasts, I might have hit that around day 10, 11, 12. I was really surprised that I'm starting to experience that. I've been feeling that for the past 16 or 18 hours. So I feel like I'm in that phase now. So this might be something like the 4th phase of fasting. On the blog, you can look at the documented numbers of the weight loss and what I've done today. So that's there always. But what's not on the blog is the story now about part 2. Why am I teaching Qigong? Why am I here doing this every day? How did I get started? Well, yesterday I told the story about the first time I did Qigong, and what it unlocked in me, the pain that was relieved, and over the next few weeks how I just rapidly had this unexplained learning. Like I learned all kinds of Qigong. I didn't even learn it. It's just I sort of figured out, somehow I downloaded the information where I already knew it. Really unexpected. And even more unexpected is what happens in part 2 of the story now. So leading up to this, on my 30th birthday, my dad took me up to the top of this mountain on the wettest place on earth. And that was really special to him to share that to me because it was difficult to get there. Now, he actually found a path where he could drive up there. It wasn't actually the top of the mountain, but we kind of came close. After studying Qigong, and about 3 months later, I was deep into this. I'm doing Qigong 5-6 hours a day. That's all I wanted to do. I wasn't thinking about anything. Let me just learn Qigong. And my 40th birthday is approaching. Somehow I got the idea that my dad took me up to the top of the mountain on my 30th birthday. So every decade now I'm starting a new tradition where I'm just going to go up there once every 10 years. And so I'm going to camp for 3 days. So around the 40th birthday, it doesn't have to be on the actual 40th birthday. I did it as it approached. I just couldn't wait. I felt like I had to do this. So camp up there for 3 days. And then when I'm 50, 60, once a decade I'm going to do that. So at 8 o'clock at night, I wanted to go up in the night. I had a headlamp only, and strapped to my back I had a tent and a sleeping bag. And I decided, let me go up to the top of this mountain where there's nobody. It's very unlikely that I'd find anyone. I wanted to do a bit of a hermit monk type of retreat, and I wanted to further seek. I felt like I got the answer in a lot of ways that I need to be doing Qigong for my life's mission after a year of praying. What do I do next? But But still, as the 40th birthday approached, I wanted to do something just intense to seek that purpose, because I wanted the next decade to be very powerful. I wanted to do something that would have a lasting impact to help humanity and leave a legacy and start something real here. And I had no idea what that was. I just felt that urge that I had to find it. So 8 p.m. On a Sunday night, I think it was, I had this backpack. It wasn't even a backpack. I figured out somehow how to strap a tent and a sleeping bag to my back. And at the bottom of this mountain, I left my desire for food at the bottom of the mountain. It's still there. I left it at the mountain. Since then, I haven't been ruled by food. So I left that there, and I asked, for that gift and for that ability. And I believe that I was actually blessed with that in this process. And I also was asking for this higher purpose to be revealed to me. And I was just going to go up to the top of this mountain, do Qigong for 3 days, and then I would come back. So there's an interesting story that happened along the way. There's many cool insights over this 3 days that seem to last almost forever. I've got a lot of cool stories to tell. But today, I'm just going to share 2 of those stories. So as I started to walk up this path, now it's pitch black at night. It's kind of overcast. It's rainy a little bit. This mountain sort of has, at the top of it, it lives inside of a cloud. It wasn't totally cloudy, but it was like half cloudy. So I could see some stars before I started. As I started walking up, there was a path that was about this wide. Now, for most of the path, you have cane grass, which is this tall grass that's like 7 or 10 feet tall. And the path started out this wide. Now, I start walking, and it's about a 3-hour hike to get up to the top of this. So I start hiking, and over the next hour, it gets gradually narrower, to the point where the path is maybe 2/3 of my size. Like, my shoulders are actually wider than the path. The path is literally like the size of my feet. So as I'm walking, my body is just pushing grass aside. I've got a battery headlamp on my head so I can see. I can only see a few feet in front of me. It's misty, foggy, cloudy, rainy. Now, I wanted this to be dramatic, so it was interesting because, there are wild boar up there, and I just figured that none would bother me for this trip. And actually, the last day, I actually saw one, and that's a cool story in itself. So I don't know what's in those weeds besides me. So it's a very interesting, but I just felt that, based on faith, this is something I had to do, and I'd be safe doing it. Also with the headlamp, I could see a few feet in front of me, so I wasn't going to take a step off the cliff. And the good news is, I have all this cane grass I can hold. It's very strong stuff. You can hold on to it if you kind of fall. There's nowhere to fall. It was so thick and so dense, I could lean into it if I wanted to. I'm pushing through. I'm soaking wet, 10 minutes into this thing. So for about an hour, I'm dealing with cane grass this narrow in front of me, and I'm just pushing it with my body, with my hands a little bit, and watching to make sure that this path doesn't go over a cliff. So about an hour up, I come to a clearing. Now, an area the size of a living room, a normal person's living room, not very big, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet or 10 feet by 10 feet, where the grass is low, there's some trees overhead, and that's such a relief of a feeling. And through that I realized, wow, based on faith, I saw the path ahead of me that other people have taken. Now, not everyone takes that path, and it's been a while since the last person took that path, so it had been overgrown, but I could still see the path of those that went before me. But I still had to have a little bit of faith that one step would lead to the next, and it would lead somewhere. So for an hour, I'm saying, well, I hope I can find a spot to put my tent, and I don't have to come all the way back down again to the bottom, because this was a new path. I'd never been on this path before. An hour into it, I get to a clearing, and oh man, such a wonderful feeling to have some space, some breathing room, to be in this clearing. Now, I looked up, and all I could see is black. I could see one star. So, knowing what a mountain looks like, I figure it's black because there's a dense canopy of trees. Prior to starting, there was a sky. I mean, you could see it was dark, but you could see clouds. I saw black, so that must be the trees being so thick that I just can't see. I saw one star, and I felt like, wow, okay. So at that point, I thought, well, I could hike for 2 more hours to get up to the top. At that point, I didn't even know how long it would take to hike up there. I could hike for 2 more hours, get up to the top, not find a spot to put my tent. Well, at least I can come back here. I know I have a place where I can function. So I felt a tremendous sense of relief there. Well, I saw about 5 or 6 more of these type of spots that were a good place to put a tent if I had to. Every clearing I got to, saw a few more stars, a little bit more light. So as we grew higher, there were less and less layers of trees that could block my light, as you know, above from the higher points of the mountain. So I was getting closer. I finally did reach the end of that path, and I could see the sky way more clearly, barely any trees. At that point, the sky was bright enough where I could actually see the trees themselves, like the leaves and everything. I could actually see what was a tree and what was sky, and more clouds. Now, it was also kind of really foggy or really misty or even raining at times. So I ended up having a spot very close to the end of the path, and this was something that it was, we were at the top of this mountain. So my goal here, I set up a tent, and it just kind of rained constantly. There would be maybe 10 minutes during the daytime where the clouds would part enough to have like a beam of light shining down. Many times it opened up right above me and shined on me. Sometimes it opened over there, and I walked over there to feel it when I could. 20 minutes later, just kind of got foggy again, then slowly misty, and then heavily misty, and then would kind of rain and let out a lot of rain, and then that continued for most of the day. So much so that the tent that I had, I camped outdoors a lot in tents. This tent, just so much moisture, it just penetrated the fabric of the tent and came in. So by the end of the 3rd day, everything I had was soaking wet. So I had, trash bag in my backpack. So I was doing what I could to keep the stuff I had dry. So I was trying to wear minimal clothes out there while it was wet. So I'm up there in the top of this mountain. No one's there. So for part of the time, didn't have any clothes on. Part of the time, I had like an old shirt that I wore. It was kind of like a cape, came down, covered some stuff up, or sometimes I just tied it around my waist. So I was up there, being somewhat primitive in my living approach. I'm feeling great, just totally immersed in nature. And I'm doing Qigong all day long. Sometimes I don't really have a track of the time, but I'd be doing, I'd wake up, I'd just kind of take a nice little walk, find a place that felt good for that day with spectacular views. It was really awesome up there. Do Qigong for a couple hours, and then sometimes it might last 6 or 8 hours, sometimes 4 hours. I really don't know. But on the 2nd day up there, I'm doing Qigong for like 5 or 6 hours. And all of a sudden, I see an elderly Chinese guy, and he's in a brown robe, and he starts talking to me about Qigong. Now, at this point, I'm on a fast. I came up here. I've had a lot of really strange and unusual experiences with Qigong. I'm up here where no one can find me. There's no people up here. It's so wet, most people wouldn't even want to be up there. If they were just on a hike for the day, maybe they would wander up there. But with the way that path was, there was probably only maybe a pig or two, some wild boar keeping it open. It was pretty narrow. So nobody's up there. And how is this Chinese guy? Now, so after talking with him, he starts just talking to me about Qigong. He starts telling me things that are pretty profound. And now I call him Dashi Jia, which is like the name for teacher in this lineage of Qigong that he taught me. And his name is Wang Zhao. And I just want to clarify that the thing that actually is really cool about this is I had zero knowledge about Chinese. I didn't know any Chinese prior to this. In studying Qigong, I hadn't learned the meaning of any Chinese words that I could tell you, here's a word in Chinese, here's what it means. I had 0 words like that. So, very early on, I asked, well, why are you here talking to me? And he says, well, you've understood the Qi spiral, and this is fundamental. And because you've understood that properly, and you want to know more, here I am. So I said, wow. Now, at this point, I mean, it's a very hard story to even believe. I can't believe it happened to me on some levels, but with the quest, this is what I was looking for. And the fact that I'm here talking to a Chinese Qigong Grandmaster, as wild as that sounds, at the time, it made sense. I was like, okay, well, I can feel that there's something to this. Now, so he starts showing me some different methods of Qigong that have been around for 5,000 years in China. And what happened 5,000 years ago was, there was a teenage kid sitting in a camp, like they lived in a little village, and he goes outside the village, and he has this type of Kundalini experience, similar to what I went through a few months ago, prior to this, and the Qi awakens, and he starts to, know how to work with energy, and he starts to understand some of the basic principles of Qigong. All of a sudden, he has access to this. He lives outside the village. He stays away for a couple of years developing this practice, comes back to the village, and starts teaching it to people. Since then, for 5,000 years, this has been passed down from teacher to student through a discipleship, and that's the way it's been up until now. That's the way it's been learned in China. This has never been published. So I'm learning all these cool ancient Chinese secrets. Now, for the next, I'll say, year or so, I was really just wanting to learn this. I was given some cool fundamental practices, and as I did those, I just started to have a deeper and deeper experience. I start to be, my wife, she gets this rash once in a while. I started to be able to do some Qigong and heal it. Really cool stuff. Started to really see things a lot differently and have these really cool experiences. So, as I was learning this, I'm somewhat skeptical, at least a little bit skeptical, where I said, how do I even know this is real? And he said, I'm telling you these words in Chinese. He's not giving me any kind of definition or explanation of what these words were. So when we get into discovering Qi after this 21-day fast, there's, we're going to start learning some of these things, and this is going to unfold in more advanced trainings. But, the name of Spinning Universe Qigong is Shenjuan Yuzhou. Now, when he starts talking to me about the Qi spiral and explaining this, he didn't say what Shenjuan Yuzhou meant. And he just said, look, I'm pronouncing it so you can remember it. And, I wasn't raised in China. I didn't study in China for 10 years. I'm not claiming any of that. All I know is that I heard the word, so I was able to remember it. So I'm not claiming to even have accurate pronunciation. And he said, the way I'm pronouncing it is fine. And he said, I'm pronouncing it so that you can understand it. And he said, after this is, after we've studied together, you go and go online and you research and you see what that means. You type it in and you find what that means. And in every single case, it was just such, he was teaching me about this Qi spiral and then Shenjuan Yuzhou, which literally means spinning universe condensed into a point. That's the summary of kind of what that means. That had very specific meaning for this practice of Qigong. That just makes perfect sense. Then there's Zizao Zhou, which whenever you're generating a tremendous amount of energy and you want to send it, into the Dantian in the end to store it there, really powerfully, Zizao Zhou. That is, a command that directs the energy. That has profound meaning. Su Ku Noir, another profound meaning that matched the practice. I got the practice before I got the meaning, and I was amazed when I looked up these words in Chinese I'd never heard before, and the practice that described how to work with that energy, it literally has everything to do with what those words actually mean. And I don't know how else I would have learned that. So it was only verifiable by Google that, wow, there's really something amazing to this. And I was shown a process to teach this stuff. If you're going to tell a joke in stand-up comedy, you don't just tell the punchline. It's not going to have the impact. You have to take the proper setup. You have to build to where the punchline makes sense and it's funny. Similarly, with this stuff, there's a process where when I say teach this stuff, it's more of just show you areas worth exploring, and then you actually teach yourself. You actually discover this stuff for yourself. So I can only talk about it in a sense that may seem foreign or bizarre, but what has been given to me is a process to teach this so that you can actually experience this stuff for yourself. Now, why go through this process? Well, a lot of people say, well, let me get a PhD in Qigong. Let me become a master. In this lineage, it's very important that we don't distinguish that. That's why we don't use the word master. Dashija is just sort of the title for, let's just say, further along teachers is the intention there. Although it does have kind of a meaning master. Well, we have this idea that we're going to study something and then get to a point of mastery. Qigong really isn't set up that way. You can begin on day 1, and on day 30, you might have the feeling like, wow, I've mastered this. I'm at such an advanced level compared to day 1. And it's true. You'll see tremendous progress. But on day 30, you have no idea what day 90 is like, or day 150, or day 1,000, 3 years from now. So this is like that. And this process can just keep going. Now, why follow that process? Can you study this stuff on yourself? You can study this stuff by yourself, absolutely. Whatever area you explore will become more available to you. Now, I studied meditation, self-studied. I didn't, follow any program. I just completely on my own meditated for 25 years. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of interesting distractions along the way. You can just stay at a place because it's beautiful for a couple of years, but it might not be the place that you really want to be at long term, and it might not help you progress. If you go up the mountain and maybe see the beautiful things and acknowledge them for what they are, but not stay there for too long, still stay on the path, you get to the top of the mountain and then you see the view of everything, and then you can pick where you go. And that's what this process will lead you in Qigong. So it's an honor after several months, I think it might have been 6 whole months, where I'm just wanting to learn this stuff. I had no thought about teaching it, but I started to feel the inspiration like, wow, this has been so meaningful to me, so transformative. I want to share this with other people. So I started to get that inspiration, like, I feel like I need to share this. Now, being aware of the lineage, it's been passed down from teacher to student. I wasn't going to do that if it wasn't okay or if it wasn't allowed. So I asked the Dashija, and he said, well, the reason why you're learning this is because you have the ability to put information on the internet, and that's actually, we've reached a point in humanity where it's needed, where this needs to be public. In the past, this has been reserved only for kings and dedicated monks and carefully chosen individuals to learn this directly from a mentor. But now, we've actually reached a point where humanity needs this. It's the next stage. And in the Western world, for the past couple thousand years, all of our super genius minds have been focused on the external world. How do you make a better bridge? Or how do the planets revolve around the sun? These type of external reality questions. And business, we've had the Rockefellers, the Carnegies building these massive industries. Innovation in the external world. Now, at the same time, in the Eastern world, in China and India and other places, they haven't focused on the outer world, they've focused on the inner world. The greatest minds have actually gone within and worked with Qi and have developed, an inner science. And now this, just want to reiterate, it's not a religion, Qigong. It's sort of a science of the mind, a science of the inner workings of the body, and how that connects with the, the external universe, right? So just by, over thousands of years, just by paying close attention, when you do something, how do you feel and what's the impact of it? I mean, the Taoists in Qigong, they come up with action and reaction, and for equal, for every action there's an equal and positive reaction, equal and opposite reaction. A lot of the Isaac Newton type of ideas totally embedded in the Taoist way of thinking way before Isaac Newton. He just explained it in a more scientific Western mind kind of way. So this knowledge has been around for thousands of years, and our minds have just been on the science. It's been on the external world, and we're actually reaching a point where technology, it's hitting certain limits, certain possible natural limits, and now we're connected. Like we've always actually been connected. Native Americans, Hawaiians, the indigenous people around the world, they had an internet through prayer and stuff. There's a way that people were connected spiritually in the past that we've just forgotten about that. That was known to people hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, all over the world, everywhere. And now that we're so connected, there's really a need for our mind and our body to be in harmony. And as a microcosm for the universe, the body is basically just holographic, like a miniature of the whole universe. So just as we can use Qigong to harmonize the cells in our body and get them living in a harmonious way, by doing that within ourselves, then our relationships with other people change. We basically start to have this energy that's healing, not just to ourselves. Once we heal completely and remove all our blockages, we are overflowing with this goodness, with this Qi energy, and then that starts to affect people around us. It becomes contagious, and in some ways it actually reaches across barriers of space. In other ways, in the more spiritual, emotional sense. So there's a lot that we don't know about how life and existence and consciousness works, but there's a lot that we can learn that's super valuable from this 5,000-year tradition. Now this Shenjuan Yuzhou, Spinning Universe Qigong, is not something that was ever taught publicly. So again, Wang Zhao was able to realize that I'm someone, my past history was that I taught a lot of online courses, I published a lot of information on the internet, and was able to get that out there where hundreds of thousands of people were able to learn that information on the various topics that I've taught. So when I asked, can I teach this, he was just waiting for me to ask about that. He probably thought that eventually I would want to. And that's why I was chosen, but also because I was tapping into the Qi field, and I had that Kundalini awakening, and I understood some of the basics. I kind of got myself, I tapped into a good enough level where it made sense. I could be trusted with this. So in China, there's probably a lot of this Qigong that hasn't been taught publicly. It's still quiet. There's also hundreds of other types and flavors of Qigong that are out there. And I'll just say they're all good. And once you learn the concepts of Shenjuan Yuzhou, Spinning Universe Qigong, it can be combined with other Qigong forms, but it doesn't need to be. It can function as its own complete method of Qigong. And the really cool thing that I like about it over other forms of Qigong that seem to focus more on certain individualized aspects is this is really completely universal practice that you can use for any type of intention. So, you can use this for law of attraction, manifesting abundance kind of stuff. You can use this for health, for well-being. Pretty much any intention you can think about, you can use this to align your energy and focus and make that happen. So it's really an interesting, dynamic, fascinating process, and it's going to be different for everyone. But from what I've seen, I know the experience is going to be profound and transformative. So I'm really honored. There's a book coming. I'm going to write the full story on every detail that I can remember and share, document this whole encounter with the Dashija and the history that he's taught me of this lineage that goes back 5,000 years. One other thing I'm going to add is 5,000 years ago, this didn't just happen in one place. Around that time, certain places in China, different places, a similar story kind of happened. And in India, Egypt, ancient Polynesia, Native America, all these places, different Kundalini awakening type experiences. India, of course, we all know that. Kundalini awakening type of experiences, that's the, an Indian term, the Kundalini energy, awakened. And people began to have access to this kind of stuff. Spinning Universe Qigong follows a particular lineage, and then over time, as different people migrated, some of these even mixed. So there are a lot of parallels and similarities between this Qigong and other forms of Qigong, but based on everything that I've learned and researched, this is also very different. It has its uniqueness that I really love, and it's just been super profound for me. So that's why I'm here sharing this. I've got a dozen books planned, and I've got a few different really powerful courses planned for the next few years coming up. I've got that all mapped out. I'll be sharing more about that on the website. After the 21-day fast, we've got a 36-day free to everybody, always will be free, 36-day Discovering Qi, where we actually start to teach this Shenju and Yujo. Just doing this 21-day fast is a little bit of a warm-up, just to get the practice of creating these videos daily, forming that habit, and also just losing weight a little bit more quickly than I'm used to. The shirt is starting to get pretty loose. It'd be really neat to see on day 21, in 12 days, how loose it is. It might just look pretty silly, and I kind of hope it does.